All right, so I want to talk about the 4 metrics in marketing that I pay the closest attention to. And there's tons of things that you can measure in marketing, but I think as long as you have your eye on these 4, you have a really good sense of where things are going, how the business is doing. But first I'll start with a little story. So back when I was in college, I was on track to be an advertising major, and I took a class called Creative Strategy. And it was interesting, but the path and the track that it was putting me on was to be like a Mad Men, Don Draper type of creative New York advertising, Madison Avenue type of advertising person. And there was something that was off about it to me. And, maybe I was too heavily influenced by TV, but also just my research into it and the type of work that they were putting out. It seemed really subjective that, it was kind of whoever could come up with a creative idea and win awards, but did it make any sales? Was it actually effective as an ad? That was a little bit undetermined. So, there was a focus on winning awards rather than getting sales. And so I switched my major into journalism because I was a lot more attracted by the idea of truth-seeking and storytelling. And it kind of came full circle later. So I stumbled upon the world of direct response marketing. Sometimes it's called conversion marketing. But it was a lot more measured. And funny enough, the guy who was one of those Madison Avenue agency owner types back in the 60s named David Ogilvy, he's considered, the godfather of modern advertising, really respected, maybe the most respected guy in that world. And in his book, Ogilvy on Advertising, he actually is the one who gives the most credit and says probably the best section of our advertising efforts is actually the direct mail department, which before the internet, before there was social media marketing or email marketing, that was sort of the direct response department, because they would send out physical mail, which they still do today and is still effective, still can be effective. But so he said, he really liked those guys because they really were measured in their efforts and their responses. So you send out 1,000 letters, and then you can measure how many people responded to those letters. So now it's a lot easier these days doing that stuff online. But yeah, so it's funny that guy who was kind of the king of that world also noticed the same thing, that this conversion measurable direct response was the way to go. So after graduating, I did stumble on that world, and now I'm in the marketing and copywriting side of things for direct response and online internet business. And it was a cool full circle moment to see that, and to know that my instincts were right from the beginning. That I'm not saying there's not a time and place for kind of creative stuff or getting a bunch of engagement or entertainment and getting eyeballs on a business in that way. That it's not all wrong, but being able to really measure, combining the art and the science of marketing is possible. So that's why I focus on these four numbers. And the 4 I look at are CPA, so cost per acquisition of a customer or a client. Sometimes it's also called CAC, customer acquisition costs. Average order value, so that's how much each order that you get comes in, so the total dollar value. Then there's LTV, lifetime customer value, so once you acquire someone, how much can you expect for them to spend with you over the lifetime of being a customer? And then the final one is the payback period. So just to go into an example for that one, so let's say you spend $100 in Facebook ads, and you acquire a customer, and that customer, so in that case the customer acquisition cost would be $100, and the customer spends $50 with you in that initial transaction. So now you've got a $50 gap, a $50 loss that you took on that person. The payback period measures from the moment they become a client, how quickly can they spend more with you to recover the cost of acquiring them. So in this case, Facebook ads, customer acquisition costs can be high because you're spending, actively spending money to put ads out there and get someone. In other cases, CPA, the acquisition cost of them can be really low if it's a referral, a free referral from somebody else. So it can be close to zero if you're not measuring like time or how much money it cost you to develop that referral, which is really, really deep analytics that we don't need to get into. But so these four work together really well, because let's say, so you spend 100, the customer acquisition is 100. And let's say the initial product is $10. It's like a $10 book. And then once they buy that book, you send them to an upsell page, and they buy $40 more worth of something. Maybe it's an audiobook version, maybe it's a private video masterclass that goes deeper into the content that the book talks about, and that's how they ended up spending $50. And then let's say you had another upsell after that, if they took that one, and it's a $300 private consultation, and they decline that. So again, you spent $100 to acquire them, they spent $50 with you on the initial transaction. Now it moves from the front end to the back end. And if you're looking at LTV, lifetime value, and you're measuring that, and that once someone becomes a client, whether they spend $10 or $50 in the beginning or $360, that's when you start measuring the LTV and the payback period. So from there, you're going to, send them emails, send them communication, put new offers in front of them as an existing customer now versus, someone who's cold. And if you're able to measure, let's say, they didn't take the private consultation, but then you send them a 10 email sequence over a couple weeks to kind of further educate them, further provide insight and overcome objections. And those emails, if you continue to pitch the consultation, they finally take you up on it. So now they have spent $300, and let's say so it was over that 2 weeks that they did that. And let's say that happens on average over all of the customers. So the average payback period would be 2 weeks. So this is important because the shorter the payback period, the more money you have to reinvest into advertising, because then the cash that you're investing into advertising, it takes less time to gain it back and to reinvest it. So if it took a year instead of 2 weeks to go from to recover that $50 loss, that would be harder because you need more and more cash to come up with to keep acquiring customers. So ultimately then, let's say after they take a consultation, then they upsell into your higher ticket program. Maybe it's a $10,000 coaching program or a $25,000 mastermind or something like that. This is really using the example of a lot of internet style businesses. But as long as you know your average lifetime value of all of your customers, then you gain a lot more confidence in going in the red and taking a loss initially to acquire them, because you know that you have a good system on the back end that helps upsell them and make it worthwhile in the long run. So again, that can be coaching programs, it can be custom work, it could be client work, it could be events that they come to, all that kind of stuff, private masterminds, advanced products and software or something like that. Those four numbers really allow you to understand the numbers of how you're bringing people in the door. And again, there's so many details we can go into of different ways to acquire, whether that's paid ads or affiliates or referral system, or there's tons of things that affect the price. But you can have confidence in spending money to acquire people if you build your back-end system really well to know that once someone becomes a customer, the art of doing that, now we know the science of the numbers of how it works out in the long run. So those are my 4 that I keep my eye on.